this is the Elixir of Awareness channel, and you're watching the 16th episode. The name of the main character of this episode is Mama, who specializes in mediation between group members. That is to say, when a dispute or conflict occurs in the group, she's the one who convenes a three-person meeting to resolve the dispute. For example, the head of this group named Nikki, who has recently reached this position due to his inexperience, starts to show his power and annoy other members of the group. And the members of the group get angry and rebel against him, and Nikki runs away from fear and climbs the tree. Every time Nikki tried to come down from the tree, the members attacked him and he'd to go up the tree again. After some time, Mama, the main character of our story, goes to the top of the tree and talks to Nikki. And sometime later, she takes Nikki's hand and they both come down from the tree. Interestingly, when Mama comes down from the tree with Nikki, the other members don't attack Nikki anymore. Mama takes Nikki's hand and brings him to the center of the protected area, and after that, Nikki won't abuse his power anymore. The members will be satisfied with him, and the situation getting better again. The interesting thing is that Mama and Nikki and other members of this group, all of them are chimpanzees who live in a zoo. In this episode of the Elixir of Awareness channel, we want to talk about the ideas of a book written by a famous primatologist named Frans de Waal. The name of the book is Mama's Last Hug. And the attempt of the book is that by using different types of scientific research, stories, and observations, we can better understand the behavior of animals and then think about what we can understand about ourselves with this new knowledge. As we said, the main character of our story is Mama. Mama is a very intelligent and powerful female chimpanzee in her group. Mr. Frans de Waal has had the chance to watch the Mama and other chimpanzees for years and analyze the details of their behaviors. To understand the level of intelligence of Mama, it isn't enough just to explain the way she interacts with the group. Her interaction, even with the employees in that zoo, is really very interesting and strange. For example, Mama has very little direct contact with the zoo director. But from his dealing with other employees, she realizes that he's probably an important and influential person. That's why she tries to behave better in front of the zoo director to earn special points for her colony. For example, more food. There's one other story that shows how amazing creatures primates or apes are. A young female chimpanzee named Urdia tries to get close to Nikki, the alpha of the group. Due to her close relationship with the alpha male of the group, she earned many points for herself, and because of this, she reached a good position. To warn Orsia, the Mama goes towards her and gently hits her on the back. Orsia, being very sure of her position, goes to Nikki, the head of the group. And then Nikki, with aggressive gestures, goes toward the Mama. But in order not to disturb the rules of the group, Mama doesn't show any special reaction, and she lowers her head and doesn't go towards Orsia the whole day. But night falls, and as usual, the chimpanzees are brought inside the building, and their colony turns into smaller groups. After a short while, Mr. Frans de Waal hears the noise of controversy and shouting from inside their group. Then it turns out that when Mama was alone with Orsia, without the support of male chimpanzees, especially Nikki, she immediately got involved with her and showed aggressive behavior. In fact, the calm behavior that Mama showed throughout the day was due to expediency and for the sake of the group's peace, but it didn't mean that Ordia's arrogance was forgotten. The interesting thing we learn from this story is that these close relatives of ours, which means the chimpanzees, can manage their emotions just like us. That means, for example, they can postpone their anger. Sometimes they don't need to react immediately. And sometimes they need to wait a little to plan and express their anger at the right time. Do you see? Most of the theories that argue about the uniqueness of human emphasize that human has the power to control and management of their emotions. The thing is, following feelings without considering the consequences, whether in animals or humans, is about the most stupid thing one can do. And in other species of animals, we see this ability that they've the ability to postpone their feelings. Animals also show other emotions that are very surprising to understand. For example, Barbara J. King, the American anthropologist, in her book titled How Animals Grieve, says a lot of interesting things about her observations. For instance, Mrs. Barbara J. King talks about a chimpanzee mother who carried its lifeless baby for 27 days during one of the wars in West Africa, and showed all the signs of mourning. This condition has also been seen in dolphins. A mother dolphin may keep its lifeless baby on the water for days and not be separated from it. Some elephants return for years to a place where they lost one of their relatives, just to touch and visit their remains. We want to say that even a complex feeling like mourning isn't only exclusive to us humans as we think. And different species of living beings clearly show this complex emotion. The basic structure of our brain is completely similar to other mammals. That means we also have the same neurotransmitters. For example, most of the drugs that affect the nervous system of our brain are tested on different species of mammals, such as mice, before they're mass-produced and used by everyone. This is because the neural and cognitive network of our brain is very similar to the brain of other mammals. 99.4% of our genes are completely identical to bonobos. Do you see how little our difference is? And it's very strange that for many years we deny this amazing similarity and considered it a very special place for ourselves. In 1641, Tolpe was the first person to dissect the corpse of an ape or primate and notice the great similarity of structural details, musculature, organs, and many other details of their body with humans. Chimpanzees have exactly the same number of facial shape or muscles as humans. Many of the emotions that we think are exclusive to us humans can easily be seen in other animals as well. For example, we all know what happy jumping is. Among most of the mammals that are playful, including goats, cats, dogs, horses, and primates, and in all of them there's a jump that is caused by excitement and happiness. Mr. Frans de Waal tells other interesting stories about the interaction of humans with chimpanzees. For example, when suddenly the foot of a primate slips and the other primates are watching, the first reaction of them is worry. But if it turns out that their friend is good and has no serious problem, then with a relaxed gesture that is completely recognizable, they show their teeth, which means smiling. If you look at human interactions completely impartially, our smiling is also the same as showing our teeth, which is a sign of friendship, intimacy, and happiness. Another very interesting thing about this, our relatives, which means the chimpanzees, is that they strangely always recognize the difference between male and female correctly every time. For example, in this behavioral laboratory, male chimpanzees reacted more attentively to the female employees who worked in the laboratory. One day, Mr. Frans de Waal and one of his male colleagues decide to find out how they can tell if a person is a woman or a man. They put on female makeup and wear female clothes. Then they pass of the front of the glass of the male chimpanzee's cage. But strangely, none of the male chimpanzees showed any attention and didn't even raise their heads. Of course, you ask how they can do this. And the answer is we don't know, not yet. And it's still a huge mystery. But what we can understand is how complex their emotions are in a series of areas and how much they can have a deeper understanding than us. Another experiment was conducted, and in this experiment, 2 short videos were shown to a chimpanzee. In the first video, which we call the happy video, a researcher approaches the chimpanzee with a basket full of fruits. And in the second video, an unpleasant scene for chimpanzees is played. For example, a person approaches them with an anesthetic gun. After showing each video, 2 happy and sad emoticons are displayed on the monitor. The purpose of the experiment is to see if the apes can recognize the relationship between the emoticons modes and the content of the videos. Interestingly, they always chose the emoticons related to the content of the videos completely correctly. Let's go to the bonobos' habitat at the San Diego Zoo. There's a water puddle in their enclosure. One day the zoo staff empty the water puddle for cleaning and are ready to refill it. When one of the employees of the zoo is about to open the main water valve, he sees the male alpha of the group hitting the glass with their hand and making loud sounds. The story was that some young chimpanzees had fallen into the water puddle while playing and could no longer get out of the puddle. And if the water in the puddle was changed on schedule and the water entered the puddle, they'd surely have drowned because the apes don't know how to swim. Then the zoo workers brought a ladder and took all the bonobos out of the empty puddle and saved them. This story first of all shows that the alpha of the group understood very well how and by whom the main water tap is controlled. And then they realized that when they'll open the main water valve, it will be a serious danger for the members of the group trapped in the empty puddle. And then, for this reason, they tried with all their might to save their lives, and of course they succeeded in the end. Or in another example, Pony is an old chimpanzee in the colony who has arthritis. She's limited mobility, and sometimes it's even difficult for her to reach the faucet. So her younger friends often went and filled their mouths with water to give Pony water. What we know is that there's no such thing as morality or good and bad in nature. But why are all these empathic behaviors observed between different species of animals? It isn't because they're loyal to a strong moral and value system. Rather, the reason is a factor called survival and their correct understanding of this word. Unlike most of us, animals that live in a group understand that they need each other for survival. And to survive, they need to create frameworks to help and cooperate with each other. Most animals are other-centered instead of self-centered. And they know that it's very important for their continued survival to observe fairness, cooperation, and empathy with their group members. And isn't that what we humans have forgotten for a long time? Animals, like us, their behaviors, personality, and reactions are formed under the influence of the environment. Researchers did a bitter experiment and kept pigs in different habitats. One of the habitats was small and stressful and was not in good conditions for pigs to live. But another series of lucky pigs were kept in bigger environments with fresh foods and water, and excellent conditions were provided for them. Two different sounds were played for these two different groups of pigs. For the first group, a voice that announced good things. That is, whenever this sound was played, each of the pigs was given an apple, which was their favorite food. But another sound announced bad things for the second group. For example, they were showing an empty bag of food to them, and then they weren't given food. After repeating this several times, both groups of pigs were able to understand the meaning of the sounds. And then they played an obscure third sound for both groups, a different sound from the previous two. The interesting question is, what was the reaction of both groups to this ambiguous third voice? The answer is their reaction was completely related to their living conditions. That is to say, the pigs who lived in good conditions, when they heard the third sound, they expected something good to happen, and they were reacting with a kind of optimism. But the second group, who didn't have favorable living conditions, had a different reaction and didn't even go towards the sound because they probably expected to see the same ridiculous empty bag of food. The conclusion is that the living conditions of two different groups of animals, exactly like us humans, lead to the formation of different assumptions in them. A special signal has a specific meaning for a group that had good living condition, and the same special signal has a different meaning for another group that didn't have good living condition. What we can understand here is the sensory and behavioral system of these creatures. Due to the past conditions of their lives, these amazing creatures create a series of assumptions about the world, events, and their expectations of the world. We can conclude how similar we're to them in terms of the influence of past circumstances on our perception of our future. There's another interesting and surprising experiment to understand the complexity of the minds of different animals, especially apes and primates. For example, Mrs. Erica van de Waal, a Dutch primatologist, conducted a very interesting experiment. She gives a bunch of wild monkeys corn for a while. Some corn kernels were blue and some were pink. The blue corns had the delicious taste of regular corn. But the corn kernels that the researchers made pink had a taste that the monkeys hate. Apart from this group, for another group, the situation has been completely opposite. It means blue corn kernels had a bad taste and pink corn kernels had a good taste. When they did this after some time in both groups, the monkeys gradually found out which corn kernels they shouldn't eat. After some time, researchers removed that bad taste from all corn kernels. It means that both blue and pink corn kernels had a natural and good taste. The important point of this experiment is that they did it when new babies were born in those groups. It's amazing that out of 27 newborn monkeys, only one of them eats both colors of corn kernels. And for generations, this topic was engraved in the minds of monkeys, which color is bad taste, and they refuse to eat that color of corn kernels. Isn't this very similar to the traditions that we see in human society? It means that something happens and people decide to have their own perception of it, and this perception is passed on to the next generations as an obvious thing without even being questioned. One thing that is very important to primates is the issue of fairness. In fact, this is the factor that maintains the group. For example, it's very important for them whether the conditions, rules, distribution of food, or even attention are fair or not. For instance, if you feed two monkeys differently, they'll not protest or they'll not understand at all. But if both of them tried to get that food, the story is different, and it's important for them how much is the share of each of them. That is, if they've worked hard for that food, then it's important whether it's divided fairly or not. Here we can understand an important point about ourselves and our society. When we're so similar to these creatures, so issues such as fairness or justice are important and vital issues in any society or any human group. And perhaps it's the most important criterion by which we can measure different human groups to find out how well they work. We made things too complicated for ourselves. It's very simple for everyone in the group to be rewarded according to their efforts and the role they play in the group. But the problem is that the difference between us and other creatures is that we humans have created a large number of complex semantic systems in our minds so that we can justify inequality and lack of fairness and justice using them. In East Asia, for example, in Thailand or India, a bell is tied around the neck of young elephants so that their distance can be determined and their position can be recognized, and they can't go far away. But elephants usually fill the inside of these bells with grass to prevent the production of sound, and as a result, they can search the surroundings secretly. Several scientists used to believe that the reason that humans are smarter than other animals is that the number of neurons in our brains is more than others. This means that these neurons of our 1.4 kg brain have made us smarter. But what do you think about the 8 kg brain of the pincer whale? What do you think about this fact that the neurons of the 4 kg brain of elephants are almost 3 times more than humans' brain? We aren't necessarily smarter than whales, elephants, and octopuses. Rather, our type of intelligence is distinguished from them by a special concept and feature called language. We've a common gene with chimpanzees called FOXP2, which controls hundreds of different features related to speech. But there are a series of very small differences between our version and theirs, which are related to learning and using the language. This is why chimpanzees can learn only a few words or signs to communicate, but humans are able to recognize about 42,000 words by the age of 20. Actually, this is where our path separates from other species of animals. This feature of language and speech is our most important strength, and of course, at the same time, it's also the most important reason for our suffering. Because we create many semantic systems with this language. All the semantic systems that we create and animals can't create are the result of a very valuable and important concept called language. But the point that we should be careful about and think about is that lest we should take meaning systems more seriously than the essence of the story, which is life itself. Lest we should change the place of life with these semantic systems and lose our way altogether. And lest we should take ourselves and our beliefs too seriously so that we forget the nature of life. Why do we fight each other, and we've been doing unnecessary violence against each other for years? Yes, also there's violence in nature, for example. A lion hunts and eats a deer. But there, the problem is only hunger. No lion hunts any deer because their beliefs are different from each other. It seems that these facts can have some other important flicks on us. One of them is that our relationship with the environment, animals, plants, and nature, and all beings, in general, is a pathological and domineering relationship, because we don't know much about their complexities. If in societies, educational systems consider knowledge about living organisms as the main part of the education path. As a result, the future generation won't repeat many of our mistakes or violence towards the environment and can stop it. Another flick is to know that distancing ourselves from our inherent nature in life has caused many of our mental and emotional sufferings. A group of scientists at Essex University conducted almost the most comprehensive review in this field. During 3 years, They conducted a complete and comprehensive review of 5,000 families' mental health. And they checked what happens to the mental health of rural families who migrate to the city. In fact, they wanted to know what's the relationship between human closeness with nature and mental health. Of course, it's clear that when we're close to nature, we feel better. But how much better? What they found in this research is that for people who were depressed and then encountered nature, their recovery was 5 times faster. 5 times. See if this was a drug that could make a depressed person 5 times better, how much it would be a bestseller. And how much did everyone were talking about that drug? This is a very important point, that when we get better in nature, why don't we do it? When we look for a solution to our bad feelings, we always go to language and words. In fact, we go to the symbols that we created ourselves. But maybe this is the language that turns our pain into suffering. Maybe it's time to know that these human symbols that we created are mostly related to recent years. It's about 250 to 300 million years that we're mammals, and about 65 million years that we're primates. Maybe we shouldn't say anything very often. Maybe many times we shouldn't look for treatment only in the meaning systems made by ourselves. Maybe sometimes we've to refer to our age of several million years. And maybe we need to get back in touch with something we've long lost. It means the relationship with our old mother, the nature. During a period of about 2 million years, during which humans have lived as hunters and gatherers in close and direct contact with nature, our brain has finally evolved into its current form. In those conditions, nature was the focus of human attention. Snakes were important, the sound of bees, and even the bending of a branch of a plant. All these were important. But today our brain lives in an environment around which jungles have disappeared, and a lonely and exhausted human being is stuck in a world. A new world that has nothing to do with the evolution of our brains. Throughout the history of human thought, such as in the fields of science and philosophy, a one-dimensional view has always been dominant. That is, all of them were always focused only on the human species, without any reference to this occupying space of our nature. We can find a bigger perspective on the meaning of life and difficult questions when we take a few steps away from the human species and watch life from a wider perspective. All these cultural advances we've made so far do not mean that we've been able to escape the grip of our genetics and innate nature. And our genes, followed by our behavior and identity, are formed under the influence of millions of years of contact with nature. We've looked at the world from our small and limited point of view so much that we've had an important misconception about ourselves and the world. We're indeed the most powerful species of life on this planet, but we aren't necessarily the most important or the best. For example, look at invertebrates, and these amazing little species like insects and think. On average, there's about 200 kg of dry weight of animal tissue per hectare of our planet. Invertebrates make up 93% of this amount. Ants and termites alone make up 1/3 of this huge mass. Therefore, when we walk in nature, according to biologists, we're watching a world that mainly belongs to invertebrates, and they somehow manage it. The truth is that the whole planet needs these little creatures very much more than it needs us. If the human species is removed from the world just tomorrow, the world will continue on its way with minimal changes. But if the invertebrate species disappear, it's unlikely that the human species can survive even more than a few months. Most of the fish, birds, mammals, and amphibians will become extinct during this period. Also, most of the plants will be destroyed, and the structure of the world also will be completely changed. Despite these facts, how can we be so sure that we're more important than all creatures? We mistakenly isolated ourselves from the rest of the world. It's undeniable that there's an innate emotional bond between humans and other animals. Human history didn't begin with the invention of agriculture in villages 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. Rather, hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago, human has lived in a completely different way in more than 99% of its history. In fact, humans have been in direct and very close interaction with nature and other living species. And then gradually the situation changed and human progressed and used the tools of language and culture. Actually, humans used different types of living things as sources of myths and metaphors. To understand the world around them, human beings used the symbols and living things of other species. And gradually this process caused the human species to separate and distance itself from the rest of the living things. And the scary question is, will this distance increase? And the more frightening answer is that there may come a moment in the future when a human decides to return again to the embrace of nature. But the environment around them has been destroyed and there's no nature left. And it could be too late. Many predictions show that humanity will be poorer and will lose important things in all the generations to come. But the question is, how much poorer? A few estimates can show us a general idea. This episode of the Elixir of Awareness channel is published at a time when every year about 0.3% of species become extinct or at least face serious extinction. For example, more than half of the creatures on the planet live in tropical rainforests. If we make a rough estimate, there are at least 10 million species in these habitats. This number we mentioned means that every year in tropical forests, about 30,000 species are becoming extinct. It means that every day about 74 species, and every hour about 3 species join history and disappear forever. This is where the importance of education and spreading awareness becomes clear. The fact is that the Earth has been unlucky. Because according to many scientists, what makes the situation of the world worse is that a carnivorous primate has rejected the boundaries of intelligence. A human, not another animal. A creature that considers themselves first and thinks about themselves, puts the family in the second priority and the tribe in the third place, and the rest of what's in the world is in their fourth priority. After all, our species can only plan for the next few generations. We must be able to bravely revise this awareness that sometimes works against life. This nature around us, and this story is the longest, most expensive, and most believable show that has ever been staged. In this show, there are no commercials, there are no repetitive moments, and there are no cheap seats or tickets. A unique multi-billion-year show is unfolding right around us, and we painfully neglected its spectacle. It seems that the time has come for us to get out of the role that we're wrongly playing for a long time, and that is the role of a selfish creature. The final question of this episode is, do you think what makes us different from other creatures? Mr. Edward O. Wilson writes in his book titled In Search of Nature like this: intelligence for the wrong species is a deadly potion for nature and all life. Perhaps this is one of the important laws of evolution, that intelligence usually destroys itself. But at the same time, this intelligence is the only point of hope to save us. The only point of hope for saving a wonderful species called human. Please share your comments with us. And thank you for staying with us till the end of this episode.
Loved the place of old.